have a long and lengthy list of questions, but I do kind of want to open it up to the audience firstly, just to see if anyone has any questions that they have thought of during the presentation. So I'll give you the opportunity now, or you can wait for my questions. And we also have somebody walking around with a microphone. Okay, perfect. I do want to give the opportunity to Jane, Ryan, and David Rocha to just basically introduce yourselves, your organizations. Just want to make sure to let everybody know who you guys are and what you're representing.
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Dave Rocha. I'm Director of Product Management at Wolters Kluwer Enablon. So Wolters Kluwer Enablon, we're a provider of enterprise EHS and ESG software solutions covering a wide range of domains. Yeah, so that's me.
Great. My name is Ryan Elliott. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Everstream Analytics. We primarily make supply chain risk management software, a heavy dose of analytics on top of that, so we put it in our name. But the goal is to provide actionable recommendations to improve your supply chain, reduce supply chain risk, and that's on a multi-tier basis. So we're looking for your supplier, and so on and so forth. Been very busy. There's some tariff activity going on, so that's kind of what we're doing right now. Thanks.
We laugh nervously.
So hello, I'm Jane Arnold. I'm the Chief Customer Officer for Aperio. And at Aperio, we're utilizing AI to solve the data quality problem at scale.
Okay, amazing. Dave, I want to start with you. In terms of Enablon, how has reporting regulations impacted your industry or driven your industry?
Honestly, it's less reactive than you think. So it's interesting to see your presentation on CSRD, and it always makes me reflect on the fact that those regulations weren't born in a vacuum. They didn't just turn up overnight. Mm-hmm. They're a product of organizations doing so on a voluntary basis over many years. Many voluntary standards have converged towards that. So what we've seen is a lot of enterprises were already having systems in place in order to collect that data, to assure that, to disclose that to their shareholders, their stakeholders. And so they have robust systems in place. It's a little bit like the system that Kathy demonstrated, something that was born out of a necessity during COVID-19 that was then adapted to solve other types of risks and provided that robust management system. So that's something that we see typically within our markets, and most of our customers are really looking for holistic, robust solutions that are going to be adaptable to changing conditions, including changing regulations.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you later on in terms of past reporting regulations, what does Wolters Kluwer do? So I'm going to hold on to that thought.
Okay.
My next question is for Jane. We are sitting in a reporting and compliance session. Please tell me, how does Aperio kind of fit into that? And how do you support companies in their compliance and reporting responsibilities?
So I've always had a personal passion for all the critical tags involved in environmental compliance. And I've done a lot of work over the years on these types of tags, as well as safety and process critical tags. And when you can measure a problem or a value, then you can know whether or not you need to fix that. So when you're talking about environmental compliance and making improvements for climate change, you have to have accurate measuring. Manufacturing, supply chain, they're investing millions, billions of dollars in data, in sensors, and connecting that data to data historians and trying to utilize that data as best as they can to try to solve this problem. But what we found, and is what David rightly described, is that a lot of that data is bad, but you don't know it because the scale is so large. And so we're tackling it with these micro models. For every little thing that can go wrong, we've got these micro models that allows us to scale using AI to actually address the problem. And quickly and easily, the user can get value because overnight, as David described, you actually can see your new tags in the system and the data quality events that you have, and then you can address them in a meaningful way.
Amazing. I feel like a broken record every time I say this but like you cannot report bad data. And bad data, you just gotta, and I think your partnership with David was just like a perfect example of that. And going from a 15 to 20%, having issues with 15 to 20% of those tags, and then going to a 99% was just a perfect example. So I really appreciate that. Moving on to Ryan. Ryan, we've been speaking about, you and I have been speaking about the 2025 risk, the supply chain risk report. And so I kind of wanted to speak with you about where have the impacts in terms of supply chains changed in the past 5 years, and where are they going?
Yeah, it's been a big 5 years for supply chain risk management. So everstream was around in 2020 to 2019. We'll just say right before COVID, as were many of our current competitors. COVID was absolutely a game changer. It really kicked everything into motion, into high speed. I at the time was I was a management consultant with A.T. Kearney, and I was working with the government, actually, with the Pentagon, on improving the defense industrial base production levels, basically. So a lot of industrial manufacturing, things that a lot of you focus on. But in speaking to a representative from the Pentagon in 2020, I said, I think this COVID thing might be kind of a big deal. And perhaps you shouldn't be worrying about improving the supply base. You should be worrying about just making sure they can come to work and make the stuff you need to make ships and airplanes and all the other things. And that's really what got me into this field. It got us hyper-focused on supply chain risk from the services side, and I got to know everstream through that process. But what was interesting, and I was on the services side for most of the last 5 years, is the nature, the focus on supply chain risk has changed, but really what you need to do hasn't. I know that sounds confusing, but what I found during COVID was a lot of companies scrambled like crazy to figure out really the financial volatility of players deep in their supply chain. You don't want to have a tier 3 fail and not be able to produce something that you need. So it was really hyper-focused on financial metrics, the likelihood of bankruptcy, et cetera. But what I think a lot of companies found when they dug in there, well, they found a lot of stuff they maybe preferred they didn't know. So unsavory practices, forced labor, child labor, and once those genies were out of their respective bottles, you couldn't put them back in. So companies, hopefully for the right reasons, wanted to take action. But then when I was at Kearney, we kept on working in the supply chain consulting area, we kept on getting questions on, well, what do I do about this? How do I figure out if I've got all these bad labor practices in my supply chain? And then that shifted really over the next couple of years into what people call compliance, but really that was the government coming in and regulating to make sure you weren't doing, you didn't have bad actors in your supply chain. And a lot of that also applies to practices that aren't sustainable. So especially when you get into like farming and metals mining, or you're doing that in a way that's environmentally dangerous. So of course that all is regulated. And now phones ringing off the hook around tariffs. What do we do? So the main thing with tariffs is you have to figure out where supply comes into the US, whether it's obviously it's pretty easy for your direct suppliers, but it gets trickier once you get deeper. So the answer for all of that is you need to establish multi-tier visibility, and then you need to find nodes in your overall supply map that are problematic and you want to address, and then you confirm the relationship. So that's true for tariffs, for compliance, for trying to stamp out forced labor, et cetera. So that piece has stayed the same, but the lens has changed. But it's really, if you're good at multi-tier visibility for any one of those reasons, you're going to be good at it for the other reasons, I believe.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anybody have any questions? We got 2 questions.
Hi, my question is for Jane from Aperio, but obviously you might have some thoughts. AI is a huge topic right now, and after your comment, I had to ask, what is Aperio's approach to AI? It's coming from the industrial perspective.
So thank you for that question. So we've been using AI as a key integral part of our software since late 2019, early 2020. And the way that we're approaching it, when you look at a lot of the analytical models that are built, they're very large-scale data models. And the larger the model is, the output is more generalized. So what we've done instead is we're doing micro models. So we have these small, very specific models. You saw maybe 10 different engines listed on there. So each engine is tied to each tag. So we have millions of micro models, and this allows us to scale. So we're using AI and unsupervised machine learning to automatically deploy and scale the solution. So for instance, once we connect to your data source, and then it takes a few hours, but you can come back and actually see the structure of your data. It could either be based on your asset framework hierarchy, it could be based on your physical locations and your tag naming convention, and it'll immediately tell you what is the health of your data for that location. And that is all done using AI. And then moving forward, we're planning like an AI companion that helps with all those workflow issues for the different roles and responsibilities that have something to do with dealing with the data problem. So, a maintenance request or something else, and be able to automatically connect that together. So the objective is to have as easy a lift for the end user as possible by utilizing AI.
Thank you. Another question over here.
Yeah, so this is for Kathy. It was really, what you were talking about was absolutely fascinating. By the way, thank you for obviously doing a great job that you do at what you do. When you look at all of those things that you were trying to manage, and just the uncertainty around all of them is mind-boggling. You made the statement of, yeah, I wish I would have had AI. I wish I would have. I'm really curious when you hear some of the solutions that are being talked about here today, how you rethink what you would have done in the context of having some of that technology available. And it's not really a question just to get a reaction as to like, how would you perceive using this type of technology to do what you had to do if it were to occur again?
Boy, my life would have been a lot easier. I would have gotten a little bit more sleep, I think, back in 2020, 2021. I spent the first half of my career in technology. I have a huge bit of FOMO listening to all of you talk today, going, man, if I had stuck with it 15 years ago, I probably would understand a lot more of what's happening today, but also what would we be doing? Yeah, it's fascinating to think, gosh, the quality of the data would have been much better. And then we could have focused on the experience and how that data, those solutions were used, right? And thinking, not having to worry about all the collection component of it, but really thinking about how do we synthesize that? How do we package that? And this is what, Everstream has been so great with us about, because go look at their tool, y'all. It's really cool. But just the ability to say, here's what that means for you, right? Without having to look at 30 different kind of individual indicators and saying, okay, let's drill that down and synthesize it, and here's what you need to do about it. And I think that's where, if I redid this project, that's what I would want to focus on, is because it's about decision making, and I need to help people with their decision making.
My question goes to David Clark. When you got this decision to go for a private cloud, probably, I suppose, you had a metrics decision, right? So you got some aspects like cybersecurity, like different aspects to decide to make it internally. My question is, after you regret or after you decide to make different, have you checked these decisions or weights by going to a service to assess, for example?
Yeah, so when we were originally looking at the solution, this is our company data, right? We're very protective of this, and we had this idea to say, well, we just don't want to let it outside of our walled garden, right? And so we just said that this is a have to. We have to keep it inside. And it was probably more a heuristic that we followed than a risk-based decision. Yeah, we did have the opportunity to follow our internal risk process, and we probably could have arrived at a place where we were going SaaS. I mean, I can tell you our employee personal data is managed by Workday, which was outside with SaaS. So there are parts of our organization who are allowing critical data to go outside using a SaaS model. From an industrial operations, operations is extremely conservative, right? And so I think that we were too onerous on that requirement. I think the industry, as well as looking around and see what everyone else was doing, we said, wait a minute, maybe we're too protective of this data. And I think it forced us to reevaluate the other options out there. So I would like to say that we followed our own risk process and we arrived at that, but I think that we had a lot of fear, unfounded fear in going SaaS versus staying inside. And that was an early assumption. And that forced a lot of consequential bad decisions, because then we were saying, well, should we just do an EC2 and run it, on a container there? Oh no, we need to use cloud services. Let's do Kubernetes. And if you look at the architecture, it was this flow chart that was huge. And our IT architects really believed in it, but it was very painful to get through that. It was a little bit of, I think a lot of those decisions were being driven by operations people, and we weren't trusting our IT people. So again, if this was operational data, no, it can't go outside. We want to keep it. But our IT people, like I said, they did have a process to evaluate the risk and to allow that to go outside. We just didn't follow that.
It's not uncommon. I mean, you see data dogma everywhere.
Okay. You're making me feel a little better then, right? We're not the only one.
Any other audience questions? Okay. I wanted to ask one thing. And so obviously as an analyst at ARC, I speak to a lot of solution providers, and I'm always amazed by the Rolodex of things that these solutions can do across the board, including ESG and GTC. But the one thing that I always have in the back of my head is kind of like an old person with a phone. Like, they probably know how to do a few things in terms of what their iPhone is capable of doing. So in terms of, and I'm going to be asking the providers here. So we have Ryan, Jane, and David. I want to ask you, think about the customers that you've had the best implementation processes for in terms of them purchasing a solution and then implementing it into their process. What did they do that was different than other customers, and what are the best practices in terms of a new client implementing their solution? So we can start here.
Sure. So maybe let me just pick up on that last point that David mentioned towards the cloud and SaaS. So that's a theme we see all the time. So people holding on to old ways of thinking, and that preventing them from realizing the benefits they want to achieve. So, we've seen a huge change in that space over the last 3 years, thankfully. We have some solutions that are absolutely mission critical for our customers. And these are customers that, really the backbone of some of the supply chains. So, they are energy providers, they are data centers. And their approach will always be, we're not going to adopt the latest version. We're going to go N-1, N-2, and they'd just be stuck in old ways on premise, and they'd find that they'd be having all sorts of issues, and that kind of mean time to repair was always more complex, right? So now we see, really just a paradigm shift in terms of what we're able to provide through cloud, and really just leveraging the systems that are out there today. I'm going to say one thing, because you've probably heard it before, and it still amazes me that I still see people making the same mistakes. And that is when they're approaching a project to implement a new system towards the enterprise, not recognizing critically enough that is essentially not just a tech project, but a change management project. So, really adopting, Koda's change model or whatever you want to do, and ensuring you've got leadership, you've got that change management, because it is inevitable. You are going to come across hurdles, resistance, people wanting to just do things the way that they've always done. And so you need that momentum behind you to do that. And when we see teams naively go, well, we just we're just deploying this tool, we're just going to make it available,
Plug it in.
and expect that that's going to have the right results. It's not. I wish it was that simple. And software providers often tend to display that message of, oh, just buy this thing, sign here, and everything will be magic. Well, that's not quite true. It's a bit like, I can go and buy some gym equipment, but if I don't use it, it's not gonna do anything to me. So I know it's been said before. I still see people making the same mistakes. So that's probably the number one factor I'd see is people getting success out of their projects.
I appreciate it. Ryan, do you want to tack on?
Yeah, I agree with David a lot. I guess a few other details. The data we start with for implementation is incredibly important, and you wouldn't believe how many implementations drag on forever just because we just don't get it, or we get like a small portion of it. Meanwhile, we're charging the customer for a service that depends on their data. So obviously that's going to make them unhappy. So providing the data upfront as requested, verifying its quality. Maybe we need to get you more involved, Jane. That's all really, really important. I'll give you an example. We had a customer last week who was unhappy, and a lot of our geolocation stuff is awfully precise. So you can have two facilities, less than half a mile apart, less than a quarter mile apart, and one will be in a floodplain and one won't. And that's just, we're good at this because we understand that and we're accurate. But we had a company reporting the city and the data they gave us different from the lat longitude. And of course, we default to the lat long, it's more accurate. But then they had used the city to check everything on their own. And it's just, that leads to problems, right? So that's really important. And then the other thing, just 100% agreeing with David, people, process, technology, we all know this. We provide the technology and we say, here's what you need to do people and process wise. It's a lot of work, roll up your sleeves, because if you want to be good at this, it's not just plug. It's Everstream, we've got some good tech, but it's not magic. So you need to take care of the people in the process to make this thing sing, and it just gets neglected so frequently. Now, the flip side is customers who do embrace all that. They're the ones who come up on stage and help us present and say, your products are great. So, do it right and you'll get good results.
So I think at Aperio, we're seeing the same thing. So the quickest way to value is software as a service that we manage. We can also do the private cloud, and we can also do on-prem or in an offshore rig location. We can do that. But the hardest part for us is actually getting a knowledgeable IT person who also has the privilege to execute the few commands that we need on the call with us. That sometimes literally takes months to get the right person on the call. And then it's within 90 minutes, everything's connected. We've mapped the data historian, we're starting to stream the data. But we try to make it as easy as possible. And it's really tough because you've got to have the right person on the call. Our normal end user is not an IT person. And they'll collect the information and then they put in a ticket in ServiceNow and we wait.
Wow.
And then we follow up again and they collect more information, they put in another ticket. It's just really tasting, but we're started charging. It's software as a service. And then it's time for our quarterly review, and we're still trying to get connected.
And we just told the same story.
Yes, exactly. And we literally just need a virtual machine spun up in the data center close to the data historian, and that firewall port opened. One port, one direction, two if you want to write results back. And actually getting someone on the call who can do that is the most painful part.
Thank you. There's been one topic that I've been hearing almost in every session that I've been a part of this past week, and even it started on Monday, and I think this topic about people, and I understand that we're at a technology conference and we're gonna really just rave about all the great things that technology can do, and technology comes first and how much time you can save with technology, but there's still the people involved in all of this. And so my question is to David, Clark, and Kathy, when you implement a new solution, it's not always about the technology, it's about the people as well. You are changing the culture. How did implementing that new technology or solution impact the culture of your teams?
Yeah, happy to go. I can answer that from a lot of different perspectives. One of them from the change management perspective. When you go to management and you're selling a new program or a tool or something that's going to cost them money, right? You really emphasize the positives. And somehow in that process, they think you promised them something magical that doesn't cost anything other than that investment. So the idea that you still have to have people, you're like, wait a minute, I thought you said this was magic. Why are we still having to have people, right? So that's a challenge after you get everything going and you say, I was off by one head count. I need another head count. They're like, what? So that is a challenge. But the technologies that we have to play with today, actually, let's spin this a different way. It's a good thing that they still require people. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but they do. They do require people. They require training and whatnot. So that's one aspect. That's one way I'd like to answer that. Another little spin on the reporting, the CSRD reporting topic is we'd spent a huge amount of time and effort building an automated system to aggregate the data, collect it, validate it. We had done the work with Apereo. And one of the neat things is in the past, we had these great dashboards that we shared with our internal teams. And it talked about how much energy we were using per oxygen. So we had these ratios, and if we had a catch, a save, we would say how many kilowatt hours we saved, or something like that, right? And sometimes we thought, well, let's say how many dollars we saved, because we wanted to incentivize our people and motivate them to do great things. And one of the things we realized is like, wait a minute, we're tracking CO2. We're tracking how much energy, CO2 that we're using to make something, or how much CO2 we save. And so what we did is it was very easy to put that information up on our dashboards. We were getting it anyway. And this really resonated with a large population of our people, because this is what people care about these days, right? I mean, they pretend that they do, but at the end of the day, do they really care that we saved more money and drove more shareholder value? I mean, we say that's true, but at the end of the day, does that keep them up at night? Maybe or maybe not. But especially along with our younger generations, they're very, very passionate about the CO2 and tracking. And when they can say they worked hard on a case, they helped the compressor run more efficiently, and they saved X tons of CO2, that was very motivational for them. And it was an easy win because we were already doing those calculations anyway, and we could stick it up on the screens.
So I could make this answer really short and tell you that I have a staff of 2. So change management is typically pretty easy. I just tell the 24-year-old what we're doing. But the reality is, at the time we were implementing this project 5 years ago, this was March, probably about April by the time we got to the point where we were leveraging volunteers. And people were invested. I have the very enviable position of working for an organization that exists solely to help people, right? I don't know if I said this earlier. We're a nonprofit. We're 501c3. Everything we do is around disaster relief and making people's lives better after they have just had the absolute worst day of their lives, right? And so March, April of 2020, everybody in logistics and supply chain had just gotten laid off, right? Because things were not moving yet. Now, October, November of that year, things were insane, and we spent 24 months dealing with the peak in supply chains. People were really invested. People were really motivated to do this because they knew anything we could do to keep supply chains moving meant that people were nourished, they were hydrated, they got their fundamental needs met. So I have an easy job when it comes to change management sometimes.
Amazing, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I think we should end here. I feel like we had a great conversation, and it's about 5:30, and I think we should hit the city walk.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much. I
Gavin.
really appreciate your time.